shodo! Lock on!
Hey guys, this is Malunis. Now, you may be wondering, what is this? Well, Corey wasn't really feeling up to it to do an episode. There wasn't really that much news. I'm only okay with saying this because he said it on the Twitter account. And I thought, it would be a shame if we went off schedule. I didn't mention anything to them, so this is going to be a surprise to them. I thought I would record a sort of fun-size episode that's just me. It's Meet the Cast, Malunis, hello. And I thought maybe they could do their own someday. It depends on if they're feeling up to it. But, the reason I wanted to do this, even though we're like 70 episodes into the podcast, maybe you just hopped onto the podcast recently. Maybe you don't feel like going back to the 2019. I can't imagine why 2020 is more appealing to you. But because of that, you might miss, who are we? Where did we come from, Cotton Eye Joe? We existed before Soda Pop. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. This is where I come from. Now, I'm going to just start from when I started interacting on the internet. That would be 2005, and the first fandom, you're not going to believe this, was Lego Bionicle. I will say right up front that I have used the name Malunis since 2005, so if you're a nosy type, you could probably find me in the past. I was a very cringy kind of teen. I was not offensive as far as I know. That's probably why I was cringy, but... So, BZ Power, that was the first forum I joined. The name Malunis was going to be the name of my character for Bionicle, but I also thought it was important to, create a unique identity. I think I just wanted to stand out. And I stayed around BZ Power for a little bit, but then I started going to other forums, and from there I started interacting with people through Messenger. I think that the most visible that I became was when I decided to start interacting in the Sonic fan community. Playing games, talking about the games, creating fan characters. That's when I started uploading to DeviantArt, as I recall. To kind of make a long story short, I jumped from one fandom to another. About 2009, I got into Kamen Rider. So this is where we start the tokusatsu stuff. Right. I probably mentioned it on the first episode of our podcast that Vangelis was on, but Vangelis is the reason I got into Kamen Rider. I followed his reviews, and he was posting a bunch of videos of these very cool armored superhero characters, and I was interested in, learning more about it. And then I just kind of stepped away from it. But there was a point, I forget what it was, but there was a point where I decided, you know what, I'm gonna give this another look and give it a try, and I basically asked him up front, hey, this Kamen Rider Kabuto show looks interesting. Is it a good first one for this series? And, this was about 2009. I think Decade was either just starting or Kiva was still going. I don't know. I just remember at the time he said, that's a good first entry right now. And I watched Kabuto over the course of a few months. And man, what a show. I really need to revisit it someday just to see if it still holds up. But at the time, it was so... I'm just going to use the word epic. And I don't mean in the internet meaning. I mean, legit. It was just oh, this is so over-the-top cool. And from there, I started watching Kamen Rider Den-O because it was the one that was advertised at the end of Kabuto. And I thought, oh, this kind of looks interesting. And I think I saw a clip just to get an idea of it, and it seemed like it had more of a comedic twist. So I was in for it. And from there, I just watched like one show after another. Forza was the first one that I watched as it was airing. Around 2013, I was finishing up the last few shows that I had not finished watching. So I've seen all of the Kamen Rider shows that have come out in the Heisei era, at least. And yeah, I've been pretty active in the fandom since then. When it comes to fan creations, I as regularly as I can, with 2020 being what it is, do fan fiction. I'd like to think that I do fairly well put together fan fiction. I'm not creating a character who's like the coolest protagonist who's better than the main character. I'm not creating a love interest for the main character. I'm not doing any of that stuff. I'm basically just like, what if the show had this other character who's introduced, and that character happens to be a writer? Like, that's the way that I approach a lot of these series. If you're interested, I guess the most recent one that I've got out there is for 01. It is going to be part of a 3-part thing. Like, the part 1 is just like the introduction of things. There's Humagears, who are writers, which was an idea that I came up with before Horobi and Jin turned out to be Humagear. Outside of fan creations, I think the thing that I'm probably better known for in this fandom is news coverage, because in 2013, I decided with the start of Kamen Rider Gaim that I would do my own Tumblr blog called Fruit Rider News. Originally, it was something I did anonymously just because I didn't want to... I knew who I was, and I knew that there was a chance that if things got boring for me, I might want to just kind of step away from it. And if I did it anonymously, then no one could rag me for it. It was a little bit selfish, but you haven't heard how the blog started, so buckle up. So basically, the reason that this blog started was not necessarily because I was super hyped for this series. That was part of it. The other reason that I wanted to start the blog was a little bit more childish, but I've heard from other people that this is actually not that uncommon, which is that I was really hyped for Gaim, and I was a little bit frustrated that things like the Kamen Rider Wiki or the blogs that I was following at the time weren't delivering very good information. Like, they were getting a lot of things wrong, a lot of really obvious things wrong, and I was just like, I'm really invested in this. I kind of wonder if I could do a better job than they're doing. So I tried it, and I think I did a pretty good job, considering it was a solo attempt, and to this day I'm not really a translator. But people seem to be into it, and when I finally, revealed that it was me doing it, a lot of people were just like, no way! I was really glad that people weren't mad that I kept it to myself, because a fear of letting people down. Anyway, once Gaim was over, I had to keep doing the blog because, Gaim Gaiden happened, and then Gaim Gaiden Volume 2 happened, so it kept going for a couple of years, and I think by the time we got to Ghost, I was just like, look guys, I'm sorry, but I need a break. So, I took a break, and then, with 2016... Yes, 2016, I decided I'm just going to take a chance. I'm going to go do coverage for the 2016 Rider series, whatever that may be. Eguzedo, whatever that is. And it ended up being Game Rider News, which was a little bit more casual than Fruit Rider News, especially partly because I stopped doing that one anonymously, and also more casual in the sense that I wasn't trying to make my own personal wiki, which is what I did with Gaim. It's absurd. It's It's almost embarrassing that I still go back to Fruit Rider News now whenever I need some information on a product or a name. Anyway, Game Writer News more or less went smoothly. Then I moved on to Build with Build Writer News, because people at that point were pretty into my news coverage and they were hoping I would stick around, and so I did. And towards the end of 2018, no, it was 2017, I got approached by the Tokusatsu Network. They were interested in the kind of news coverage that I did for products, because the thing that I would do is I would also like make lists of things that had been announced. You know, I'm very obsessed with keeping lists, I think. And, you know, I ended up joining the Tokusatsu Network as a guest writer. I got to meet people who work on it, and I stuck around. I was considered good enough to keep around. And at this point, I do proofreading for other people's posts, in addition to making my own. You know, I'm just going to plug right now, something I put up recently was an article about the title of Kamen Rider. What characters are considered writers, which ones aren't. And I think you should check it out. It's the kind of nerdy thing that I get into with this fandom. So, I've been talking about, like, Tokusatsu, where I come from, where I am now. What about Shodo Pop? So, Shodo was this thing that was kind of in the background for Exade. It's like, I never really referred to it as Shodo for the longest time, just because I was just like, I'm going to just describe it as the candy toy figure line, because that makes sense to people. Maybe they don't follow Shodo. So I would link to an occasional blog post, as I recall, from the Candy Toy blog, just to say, hey, they revealed this figure. But eventually my tone kind of went to, hey, they actually made this figure, which you're not going to get in the Level Up Rider series, whatever the name of the 16-inch line was called. And my tone kind of changed to, hey, look, they're making this figure, which the 6-inch line completely skipped. And during build, I definitely paid a little bit more attention to it, but I still wasn't really reading it. I was just looking at pictures. But during Geo, I was like, okay, at this point, this line is doing really impressive stuff. I respect it enough that I'm going to keep up with it and also translate it as best as I can. I will say up front, I don't really quote-unquote translate. What I do is put the text into Google Translate, and I know enough to know when Google Translate is wrong, is the best way that I can describe my understanding of Japanese. And in addition to covering it on the Tokusatsu Network, I would also talk about it on Twitter. And somewhere along the line, I got the attention of Frozen Stratos and his friend, Josh, the Living Ranger Key. That's Corey and Josh. It kind of became this unofficial, unspoken thing where it's like, the three of us would just kind of talk on Twitter in a little Twitter thread, just being like, hey, isn't it cool that they did this? Yeah, it's really cool that they did this. I wonder what they'll do next. And eventually, I talked to Frozen Stratos directly, and he presented the idea of, we talk on Twitter a lot about this stuff. Wouldn't it be neat if we did a podcast? And I think at the time my thought was, I've never been a part of something like that. But I was interested, and I wanted to give it a try. And so it eventually grew from just a podcast that we recorded a couple episodes on to a YouTube channel, social media, Anchor. It's been a very good time. I look forward to recording these whenever they come up. And I hope this was actually worth listening to. Anyway, that's me. I'd be interested in hearing Josh or Corey do something like this, but no pressure. Thanks for listening. If you want to support the Black Lives Matter movement, look at the links below, and keep it juicy.
Lock on!